Welcome on, welcome all. Thank you for tuning in to Cedarly Radio, your guide to films playing at the Art House for the week of May 17th to 23rd. My name is Aaron Spears.
And I'm Dave Huffman. On this week's episode, we'll be discussing All Creatures Here Below, Trial by Fire, Meeting Gorbachev, and Hail Satan.
We'll also be discussing whether or not China has delivered the ultimate disaster film, the stellar lineup for this year's Cannes Film Festival jury, and our Cedarly 3 picks for favorite courtroom dramas. Well, we always like to start off the show with the last scene first. So, Dave, what was the last film you've seen?
The last film I saw was a 1946 Ginger Rogers film called Heartbeat, which I had never heard of and just kind of randomly watched because we wanted to watch an old film that seemed sort of fun. And it was hilarious because she was 35 whenever she filmed it, and she was supposed to play an escapee from a reform school. She was supposed to be like
going backward. Okay,
she was literally supposed to be playing half of her age, and there's a scene where there's clearly this 35-year-old woman in a chair, and the guy's like, "Are you 21?" And she's like, "Yes, I'm 21."
Line.
And you're like, "Yeah, you're definitely 21." So it was fine. It was just this amusing little thing set in Paris about a woman who becomes a pickpocket and falls in love with a ambassador and stuff. So it was a total little forgettable trifle, but the casting of it was just kind of funny to me because
Had you seen it before? Was it
I had never. No. It was just like one of those. I don't think I'd ever even heard of it. So I was just like, what's this old Ginger Rogers movie? Yeah, that was it.
If you hadn't prefaced with 1946, I was like, Andy Kaufman as a robot? The Heartbeats?
Oh, Heartbeats.
Which not the plural version.
Which I have suffered through on the big screen, actually.
Ooh.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's some dedication.
It was part of a bad movie marathon.
Oh, okay. Well, that's right where it should be then, really.
And what did you see, Aaron?
So I was finally able to watch a certain big budget science fiction action box office setting movie.
Was it The Wandering Earth?
It was The Wandering Earth.
Oh.
Yeah. I was trying to do like an endgame setup for you there, but it was the Chinese film that I don't think too many Americans are familiar with.
It did play, I think, at Valley View or something like that.
Yeah, and I missed it because it was there in a week. It made like $5 million in America. It's at like $700 million in China. It's one of their biggest of the year, and
I watched it as well.
I was going to say, I knew you said you were going to.
Yeah.
So
I love disaster movies. So
I do
had
too.
to watch it.
So as it was going on, they dumped it on Netflix. So like if you want to see it, it's pretty easy to find now, legally and everything. And it's really fun. I did enjoy it because I like disaster movies, same as you. But I started thinking about the chronology of disaster movies and how they kind of had the heyday in the 70s. Airplane, Tower Inferno, Poseidon Adventure.
Airport 77, my favorite.
There you go. There wasn't too much in the 80s off the top of my head that I could think of, disaster movie-wise.
No, not so much. No,
but then it had that resurgence in the 90s with like Twister and Independence Day,
and Volcano, and Dante's Peak.
Volcano. I forgot about those. The Dueling Volcano, the Dueling Asteroid movies.
Yep.
And it continued 2012 and all that other stuff into the thousands. But in the beginning with the 70s, you've got like disasters that you and I might expect, like an earthquake or something, Towering Inferno. That'd be terrible. And then it got worse and worse and worse and crazier until you get to Armageddon. Those were like literally an asteroid is going to crack the Earth in half if we don't save it. And I kept thinking they can't get any bigger than this.
Oh, but they can.
And they did. And they did it amazingly in the Wandering Earth. In the first 5 minutes, there's like 10,000 jet engines on Earth moving it out of orbit. Like Earth is. I was like, it can always get bigger and crazier and nuttier.
The science of that movie is hilarious.
Oh, but it's out the window at like moment one in that movie, and they don't care though, which is kind of the fun part. Like,
you just have to buy the premise that they're turning the Earth into a movable spaceship, and it's great.
And the premise of the Wandering Earth then is that those start to fail, and they're going to crash into Jupiter. And the hard science is that the sun is going to expand and take over the Earth.
Yes.
But it's going to be in 100 years. So humanity's got to get.
We got to get out of here, and they have to use Jupiter's gravitational pull to help slingshot us out.
And they just it's a full like Michael Bay size spectacle, these huge grandiose shots, and some of the CGI is like, that's a video game. Okay, now we're back to people. That's a video. Loving the genre. It was a great great one to watch.
Yep, it's a total fun popcorn disaster movie.
So this week we opened a plethora again of new movies, and I got to say Tolkien.
Tolkien. We've been saying it wrong.
Yeah,
all
apologies,
these years.
fans. It's.
I blame my brother because he used to read them and he always called it Tolkien. So I just grew up calling it Tolkien, but it's apparently Tolkien.
I'm gonna blame not your brother, but I'm gonna blame.
Blame my brother.
The idea of like until we started hitting record for this podcast, in my head I was pronouncing all these foreign film or foreign language directors' names properly because it was in my head. I was just thinking about these movies or reading them, but then when I had to say it out loud, we're like, all right, let's check pronunciation before we hit record, and. The only comical anecdote from this weekend I have from talking to people who watched Tolkien was I would say, "Oh, are you a fan of his writings?" And the majority of people were like, "Well, the movies." And I was like, "Well, that's not his writings. Like, it's the prose style. Like, it's his language. It's the way he elevated the genre he was writing into an art form." That other authors weren't doing, but people are really, really, really loving it.
Yeah.
I have not seen it myself yet. But,
I haven't either.
I plan to check it out because it's one of those people, like you mentioned with the Herzog documentary. I don't know much about him in his personal life, so be like, oh, this is all new information to me at this point. And of course, Judi Dench, Red Joan.
Yes.
People
love a Judi Dench movie.
I've been having conversations, which we'll have in a minute here, about the whole nature of spoilers, which you mentioned on the show. Like, it's called Red Joan. I think she might be a spy. Also, it's based on a true story that you can go ahead and look at, and it's sort of in the description. But it is one of those spy movies where it's not, is she or isn't she a spy? It's the process of spycraft there.
Yeah.
And we finally had some news on the specialty box office, which, to be perfectly blunt, like Endgame just sucked the movie
it sure has.
going audience from everyone for a couple weeks there. So we had a little bit of a resurgence this week at the art house box office.
Yes. With the release of The Biggest Little Farm and limited release, it had a very strong opening, and we'll be opening it here next weekend on the 24th. So there's actually...
That is next weekend.
Yeah, it is already then. And it's we already have tickets on sale for it because there's been a lot of interest in this doc. It had a lot of buzz for it. So
I think it started at Toronto Film Festival last year.
That sounds right. I can't remember.
I remember like it popped up on the radar of just like, these are types of documentaries I like. And I was like, ooh, that sounds really good. And when we played the preview before Cat Video Fest a few months ago, my daughter was with me and my mom, and you could just hear the ooh. I mean, that's the audience for it too. Very animal loving kind of audience. The cinematography to it for being just I'm going to start a farm with my wife and partner kind of documentary. The cinematography of just the animals and nature itself looks spectacular.
Yep.
One other quick mention before we get into the movies of the week coming to the theater here. We've been mentioning actually the last 2 weeks about the Cannes Film Festival, and I hadn't forgotten. One of the things I always like to look up is the jury. Because they have an interesting way that they structure their festival where they have, a jury of filmmakers that award the Palme d'Or each year. And I've always wished that would be like a podcast or something where they do their deliberation, release it after the fact to see who's championed which movie and whatnot. But they always have a president of the jury. I think it was Kate Blanchett was last year. And I didn't read. Do you know offhand, is the president in charge of selecting the other jury members? Or
I don't know how they.
I'm not sure who's actually in charge of that.
Do that. Yeah.
Anyway, the jury president this year is Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu, so no slouch in the filmmaking department there. But it also features Elle Fanning, Kelly Reichardt, Robin Campillo, who did Beats Per Minute, which we just talked about an episode or two ago. Yorgos Lanthimos is in there.
Who I love.
Paolo Pawlikowski from Cold War.
Yeah.
Alice, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. She directed Happy as Lazaro last year, which is one of my favorite foreign films.
Oh, I don't know her last name.
It's unpronounceable, I think, German last name. So I'm just going to say Alice as if I know her. But it's a really interesting selection.
That is an amazing lineup. I mean, like, just to be, like you said, like a fly in the room, that is some...
As they're deliberating?
Amazing. Yeah. That's an amazing talent pool right there.
Especially going into looking at the films that are in competition, where like, I want to hear the debate about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood amongst all of them just to see...
it is,
and all
like,
the movies, really.
You know, legendary filmmakers judging other legendary filmmakers. Yeah. That's amazing.
And we'll be right back with the 4 new films opening this week at the theater.
This week we have a couple of special events, including a special showing of Pillow Talk in honor of screen icon Doris Day's passing. We're going to be showing my favorite Doris Day movie, Pillow Talk, which co-stars Rock Hudson. That's going to be Sunday, May 19th at 1 o'clock here at the Cedar Lee Theater. And a portion of all the tickets are going to be donated to the House of Muse in honor of Doris Day's love and commitment to animals.
We also have a Fathom Events and Turner Classic Movies. Their series keeps rolling right along with TriStar Pictures' Steel Magnolias showing Sunday, May 19th at 4 p.m. and an encore show on Wednesday, May 22nd at 7 p.m.
And the first film we're opening this week is a new drama by Collin Schiffli called All Creatures Here Below. It's about a desperate young couple on the run who seek refuge in Kansas City.
There's no way you're gonna get out of this without doing some time.
I've got a plan. I want what's owed to us. I can sell it and get us out of Dodge, and then they're never gonna see us again.
I need to tell you something.
And this is the second film that has been written by and starred David Dastmalchian, who is, they also, with the same director, Collin Schiffli, they worked previously on a film called Animals, which I had not seen. But this is a pretty powerful little drama. I would say he maybe went a little heavy with... Boy, there's just a whole lot of tragedy in these people's lives, but I know some people have terrible lives.
True.
So it's definitely not a feel-good movie. It's a very well-acted movie with Karen Gillan as well, who, of course, is in Endgame. So she's interesting that she's, in the biggest movie potentially of all time, and that she's also in these quiet little indie drama. So I admire actors whenever they do that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was a pretty good little drama. I enjoyed it.
There's always that tendency, because art houses are kind of the, I don't know, home of the auteur as they're working their way through their filmography. Also, that generally is a lot of independent auteurs out there. The fact that he's only made 2 movies with the same actor serving as also the writer, and there are both like couples on the run, outskirts of society. It was like, methinks I see a theme, coming along the
They
lines
definitely
here.
have a kind of plot that they enjoy. So,
but also sounds very like one of those actors movies. Like it's all centered on the performance and the characters. It's not like a hook of a story necessarily. It's the performance.
And it's got stuff that you think is happening, but then it turns out it's something else. And it's the tragedy that's on the surface is only the top of the surface.
Oh, okay.
It's more disturbing than you think when it starts.
Okay.
So
I'm saying the one line description on IMDb, you're like, and
it is one of those movies. Kind of the less you know about it, the better, because it just kind of unfolds.
The second film we're opening is Trial by Fire, directed by Edward Zwick. It's the tragic and controversial story of Cameron Todd Willingham, who was executed in Texas for killing his 3 children after scientific evidence and expert testimony was suppressed.
Cameron Todd Willingham, you are guilty of capital murder. By order of the state of Texas, you are sentenced to death.
You're my first visitor in a long time.
How long has it been?
8 years. Prisoners talk about doing time. On the road, there is no time. The clock stopped moving the minute we was sentenced.
How about you tell me what happened?
Girl! Help me! Any man can't save his own kids. Don't deserve to live. But I did not kill my own children, Elizabeth. I love them more than I love life itself.
I found myself talking to a vulnerable, sensitive man. I believe the state of Texas is about to kill an innocent man. You failed to challenge witnesses that changed their story.
He had the motive, he had the means. That boy is a monster, and he will die.
His lawyer decided Todd was guilty from the get-go. He failed to find a single scientific expert.
Doesn't mean he's innocent. Don't let your emotions get the better of you.
My emotions? What? Because I'm a woman? Great. I'm gonna go finish your job for you.
So this is Edward Zwick, who he oscillates between all aspects of Hollywood. He does big budget movies like The Siege, Blood Diamond, Glory, playing here June 21st and 24th. He's also done a lot of TV. One of my screenwriting classes in college was we had to examine in depth a 30-something script, which he I think wrote a lot of, directed, and at least was produced for a long time.
I think he was the show creator, wasn't he?
I think he created it too, yeah. And then he also has done plenty of art house stuff that we played here, like Pawn Sacrifice and Defiance over the years. So he's one of those, I feel like, kind of classic Hollywood directors. He's a journeyman. He can plug him in anywhere, and he puts out a pretty quality, a quality product.
And I found this interesting because it's got Jack O'Connell in it, and I almost feel like Jack O'Connell is like your go-to guy if you're making a movie about a prisoner or someone in jail.
Tortured soul. In prison. Yeah.
It's like, this is like, I think his like 3rd or 4th movie where he's, a prisoner in something. So, but he's a very talented actor as well.
This is one of those when I mentioned earlier in the show, like the spoiler thing, where I was unfamiliar with this case. So in the trailer, it plays as like, did he get executed?
Yeah.
Did he? And then it's right there in the description on IMDb. If you read the guy's actual biography, he's not around anymore.
Yeah.
Like, it happened. So that's one of those, like,
it's one of those cases that, people always cite as why, capital punishment is not a good thing because, here's clearly someone who should have been cleared, but because there was evidence that was suppressed,
Right.
So it is one of the more famous stories about that. So this is the narrative of this, and there's already been a documentary about it as well.
I was going to say there's a documentary, and once I started reading up, I'm like, oh, this is a very well-covered case. Like, it is very well-known. Just because I didn't know about it doesn't mean it's not, very well-known out there.
It is the news.
We can't move on without mentioning his co-star.
Oh, the fabulous Laura Dern.
Yeah, so Laura Dern is the one on the outside fighting for fighting for justice. So that looks to be a pretty intense one. And Edward Zwick is good at kind of mixing in like character drama with larger societal kind of social justice issues as well.
Absolutely.
Over the years. So.
And then the next film we have opening up is a new documentary called Meeting Gorbachev, which is directed by Werner Herzog. Talk about, or co-directed by Werner Herzog, I should say. A true Cedar Lee, Mount Rushmore of filmmakers here at the Cedar Lee, I would say.
That'd be a fun project.
Yeah.
What 4 faces? Yeah, he's definitely one of the 4.
And also co-directed by Andrei Singer. And it is the life of Mikhail Gorbachev, the 8th and final president of the Soviet Union.
Meeting Gorbachev is burdened by history. Please allow me to explain myself. I'm a German, and the first German that you probably met wanted to kill you. The forces Gorbachev had unleashed triggered independence movements in practically all corners of the Soviet bloc.
Das hat es in der Geschichte noch nie gegeben.
Visibly for the entire world, the Iron Curtain started to be lifted.
And this film, of course, just was featured at the film festival last month. I guess has it already been a month? 2 months. 2 months almost. Yeah. So a month and a half ago. And it's, Werner Herzog is... I'm fascinated by his kind of documentary work. I think that's almost
the
become
output.
The output of it is amazing that he is so prolific anymore in the latter half of his career, where he's really kind of almost focused more on documentaries.
I went back because I was like, as I was putting the notes together for the show, I was like, I'll just put his documentary work in our notes. So I'll have movies to reference. I was like, we don't have that kind of time.
Yeah.
This isn't a 4-hour show. But I was thinking the same thing too. But when I looked at his filmography, like he's had a lot of documentary work right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Like a lot of shorts and other documentaries, and then also got more English language, I think. So that's why we were exposed to it later on in his career. So it was easier to find as well.
Point. Mm-hmm.
But he seems to go between like biographical portraits, even back to like My Best Fiend and some of his more famous ones, but then also like the nature documentaries, which has been mostly what he's been doing recently. And I'm really familiar with because I've been showing my kids all those because they're great. They're great documentaries.
Or combining them both and having Grizzly Man.
But there you go. Put them both together at the same time. This one seems to be fascinating because the reviews for this are stellar. Like they're saying like, one of his best documentary works in a long time. And it's, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Could you say his other biographical documentaries, he's never done like a sit down. This is just a sit down interview with Gorbachev mixed with archival footage to tell the full story of his, kind of rise to power and what he did and his lasting influence.
Yeah, no.
So it's even a new format for him. After all these years, he's still like, new format he hasn't tried out before. The final film we are opening this week is also Cleveland International Film Festival alumni is Hail Satan? ? Directed by Penny Lane. With unprecedented access, Penny Lane was able to trace the rise of the Satanic Temple. It's only 6 years old and already one of the most controversial religious movements and activist groups in American history.
We're not what you think we are.
The Satanic Temple was an idea between a handful of people directly confronting authority.
This makes life fun.
State officials have put up a 10 Commandments monument on government property.
Satanists are demanding equal rights.
I am a tax-paying member of Arkansas, and I don't want that there.
They just want to irritate.
The Satanic Temple says you also need to put up our monument to Satanism.
As a Satanist, I believe that confronting injustice is an expression of one's satanic faith.
You see Christian theocracy just creeping itself into our government, and it is our duty to stand up to this.
We want people to evaluate the United States being a Christian nation. It's not. We are supposed to be a nation that doesn't allow the government to dictate what is appropriate religious expression.
Now, this one is not to be confused with the Anton LaVey Church of Satan. This is a different sect that has popped up recently, which you have already seen.
I've seen this movie, and I love this movie, and it is not the movie that I think if you said, I'm going to go see a movie called Hail Satan, this isn't necessarily the movie you would think you're seeing. It is really all about kind of First Amendment rights and the work that they do to kind of preserve the separation of church and state and making sure that America doesn't become a Christian theocracy. And it's important work that you would not expect the Satanists to be doing.
Right.
And but it's a really fascinating movie, and it's of course filled with some colorful characters. Of course. You have to question some people's like sincerity about, is it a religion to them, or is it really just a political activism kind of statement what they're doing? So it's a really good film, and I hope people come out and check it out.
Having followed them like on social media and activist circles, it's very My favorite parts of activism are sort of the performance art aspects sometimes that pop up, and this just feeds totally into my fascination with that, where a guy is just, on the courthouse steps with horns strapped to his head and a cape, making a very important, like you said, speech about, First Amendment rights and issues like that. And I think it's in the trailer audio where somebody just yells like, "You're going to hell," and he's like, "I'm looking forward to it." It's like, it just takes the wind out of like all the easy comebacks and makes people really kind of think a little bit deeper.
But it really does ask a lot of questions, and it's a really well-crafted, entertaining documentary as well. It is, you definitely have humor in it, but it's also just a very thought-provoking film and makes you realize that the things that we all take for granted can easily go one way if there aren't all the people on the other side pushing back.
Right,
so,
exactly. We'll be right back with our Cedarly 3 picks for this week. Couple more events to let you know about this week here at the theater. Ghibli Fest 2019 is rolling along. This week we are showing Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, Monday, May 20th at 7 p.m. This will be in the dubbed version.
We also have a new documentary called Asbury Park, Riot, Redemption, and Rock and Roll. That's Wednesday, May 22nd at 7 and Wednesday, May 29th at 7 p.m.
The final special event this week is The Cold Blue. It's a kind of in the vein of They Shall Not Grow Old, the way that was a World War I restored footage documentary. This is a World War II, specifically the bomber squad, the Memphis Belle, from 1943. It's a lot of National Archive footage that was shot by William Wyler and his team during that time period. So it's restored, and it includes 9 of the surviving veterans from the Memphis Belle. A couple years ago, they were interviewed, so their voices kind of take you through their whole story in the film The Cold Blue. That'll be showing Thursday, May 23rd at 7:30 p.m. So each week we like to take inspiration from one of the new films opening at the theater and suggest 3 films to broaden your cinematic world. And this week we chose Trial by Fire and the idea of courtroom dramas. I noticed when we did was Spy Films last week?
Yeah, Spy
my
Films
time
was
is just
last week.
messing with my head right now. And we mentioned like there was the Spy Museum, and they had published their own list of spies. I was like, I bet you like the American Bar Association or some legal group has probably had some fun post. And I did the American Bar Association, if anybody wants to check out their list. Actual legal scholars like, no, these are
the best
ones of how it works. Yeah. And of course, I mean, it's the classics, which, I mean, we've always mentioned on the show before too. Like, the classics are like people know about To Kill a Mockingbird, they know about 12 Angry Men. So we usually try to do a little bit maybe deeper dive or esoteric dive to come up with some other ideas that are beyond just like the couple of the obvious ones. So did I just steal anything from your list? Or?
No, you didn't.
Oh, okay,
but
good.
the first one I'm going to say is an obvious one.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that's still going to be there, but like the top few obvious ones, like those 2 movies
just
are on
because I
everybody's
love
list.
It, so I wanted to talk about it.
What's your obvious one?
My obvious one is Billy Wilder's Witness for the Prosecution from 1957, starring Charles Laughton, Tyrone Power, and Marlene Dietrich. And I just love that movie. It's Agatha Christie, adapted from Agatha Christie's novel, and it's a great twisty kind of courtroom drama. And I it's one of my guilty little pleasures of just always referencing how I think about when Madeline Kahn is doing her sort of Marlene Dietrich impression in Blazing Saddles. Like, like this is kind of what it comes from. Like whenever she says, like prison, like it's almost like Elmer Fudd. I just kind of love it. It makes me laugh.
I never really thought about that. Yeah.
So, and I always find it fascinating because, this was nominated for a bunch of Oscars.
Yes.
Marlene Dietrich was not nominated for an Oscar for it, which is surprising.
Yeah.
But weirdly that...
that's kind of the performance I remember. If you said that, like that's the first thing that would pop into my mind is her performance.
She wasn't nominated, but Charles Laughton was, and Elsa Lanchester from, or Lancaster. Is it Lancaster or Lanchester?
Well, you said both, so we
there you go. Covered. I got it covered. But who's in like Mary Poppins and stuff?
Right.
She's nominated. She plays,
she was
like,
too?
Yeah, she was nominated, and it's the total kind of like comedy relief role of the little nurse who's taking care of Charles Laughton.
Right.
And I found that fascinating that she's the one that got the Oscar nomination.
Yeah. I wouldn't have guessed that one.
No.
Yeah, I would have switched those 2 up. That's also too like. There's different elements to courtroom dramas because that one has like the twists and turns. So like you're learning about it, with you rather than other ones that like the whole case and then you go into it saying like, oh, well, how are they going to do this or defend somebody here? Which is not the case with my first one. I went with Liar. No, I'm just kidding.
Liar.
That
would be great.
My kids were just obsessed with that in the last couple of months.
That's
it's like,
funny.
guys, you got to move on from this
I've
Jim
never
Carrey,
seen that Jim Carrey movie.
It's Jim Carrey at the height of his Jim Carrey powers.
There you go.
No, I recently was rewatching this winter several Oliver Stone movies, so I went with JFK.
Oh.
Because watching the director's cut, I feel like the last hour
it is.
or hour plus, I mean, it's a whole movie on its own if you cut that out. Just like that whole courtroom scene where it's just Kevin Costner monologuing in a way I never thought I would be engaged by Kevin Costner monologuing and laying out his entire case to it there. And it's really it's just a well-disguised exposition kind of scene that works as a very compelling, kind of history-ish, I'll say, lesson, because, there's some bunch of evidence that have come about since that Jim Marrs book was published. But that was one of the first ones. It was like when I think of like courtroom drama or courtroom scenes, I was like, oh God, like JFK's got to be represented there.
Well, the first one that popped into my head when we said we were going to do this was actually Paul Newman's The Verdict from 1982. And that was just a movie I remember from my childhood, really. Like, I think we rented it on VHS.
Yeah.
And my dad, loved that movie. So I think we watched it a lot. So that was just one of those ones that kind of, stuck in my head. He's this kind of alcoholic loser lawyer who was given this case just as a sort of, gimme case of this one's going to settle easily.
Right.
He's just trying to give him some easy money to help him out a little bit. And his ego kind of takes hold and he's like, I'm going to win this case. And everybody against their, better judgment, he takes it all the way through the trial. And, spoiler alert.
What's
guess
the verdict?
What? Yeah. But it's a great movie and a fantastic performance by him and a screenplay by David Mamet. It's just a really...
Oh, I always forgot about that.
Yeah, it's a great
right.
movie. And it's one of those ones that I think no one really talks about The Verdict anymore, even though at the time...
I feel like people know that one, but people know the title, but probably haven't seen it at this point.
Yeah. So I just wanted to remind people, revisit The Verdict.
Yeah.
It actually holds up pretty well. And I just think it sort of started... In the 80s, there was a whole slew of courtroom dramas. And, Cher was in Suspect and all these other things. There was just so many courtroom dramas.
The Jodie Foster one.
Yep, The Accused. And, what
was going on in the 80s that, we just got obsessed for some reason with courtroom dramas?
And I don't know, the People's Court became extremely popular in the 80s as well. So people like the courts.
My second one, oh man, I just kind of realized I have dubious courtroom dramas is sort of what my my theme is so far. Not necessarily on the last one, but I realized I did violate it because we said courtroom dramas, and this is dramatic, but it's a documentary, so
cheater.
Maybe it's even more so because it's real.
Maybe.
I went with Paradise Lost, the childhood murders of Robin Hood Hills, 1996. And I say dubious because I'm a fan of Joe Berliner and Bruce Sinofsky's documentary work. This series I remember seeing on HBO when it aired, and it's absolutely riveting. And as time progressed, we realized, there's some manipulation going on, and there's it's not true. Just we just set up our cameras and totally just captured this without any interaction or bias or anything. But it's still, 3 people imprisoned wrongly, and you're just furious by the end, and you're furious mainly because you see the flawed justice system, just steamrolling these kids, these teens, just right into life sentences, if not death penalty sentences, and you're just you're so angry, and it also I think is really important because it just sparked so much activism, and without that movie bringing a light to that court case, you wouldn't go on with the rest of the films, the West of Memphis documentary, or them eventually being exonerated and free men now. So fairly important, I would say.
It's very important. It's a great movie. Well, the last one on my film is definitely not a great movie, but I just had to...
Is it Liar Liar?
No, but it's in many ways funnier than Liar Liar.
Okay.
And it is a film that funnier. Well, it's not supposed to be.
Oh, okay.
When we're talking
did Tommy Wiseau do a courtroom drama?
We're talking about the 80s courtroom drama kind of frenzy.
Okay.
There is the pinnacle of it resulted in the highest paycheck at that time for an actress, which was Barbra Streisand's paycheck for Nuts.
Oh, okay.
the Martin Ritt film from 1987 starring Barbra Streisand, Richard Dreyfuss, and Leslie Nielsen. And it is just a film that has not aged well. It was one of those. It was a play that was adapted as a screenplay by the same writer, which did not help it because it needed some help. It needed it to be expanded.
Yeah.
It's terribly miscast. Barbra Streisand's supposed to be playing a high-priced hooker who is in the trial that she's on trial for her mental competency to see if she can stand trial
if she's
for
nuts.
killing one of her Johns, who's Leslie Nielsen. So the movie just is it's almost like a drinking game. Like you could actually just the trailer alone, if you played a drinking game every time they said nut or nuts in the trailer, it has not aged well at all. And even at the time that it was out, it was a total Oscar bait kind of movie for her, and it did not work, and it was just not a very successciul movie.
You get some really awkward misfires with some Oscar bait over the years that people tend to just forget about.
It's one of my favorite guilty pleasures. It is very entertaining, but for not the right reasons.
Now, did you see it when it came out or earlier on?
I did.
Oh, okay.
I saw it in the theater on Thanksgiving Day with my parents.
Oh, wow.
So
it doesn't say if you watch it now, people think of Leslie Nielsen for kind of one way. And when he pops up in this, and I've seen him in like more serious stuff in his earlier career where you're just ready to laugh. Yeah. And you're like, oh, no.
It adds another layer of
awkwardness
comedy to
and comedy.
And it isn't that it's not that her performance is bad. It's just sort of wrong. You know what I mean?
Right.
Nothing about the movie it's just a misfire in every possible way. Yeah. So that's why I would recommend watching it with sort of a wink in your eye.
Those are kind of the better bad movies in a way where they're people that have talent and should be doing better. You're like, oh, just all the wrong decisions went into this.
If you don't want to watch the whole movie, at least just Google or YouTube the trailer, and that alone is going to entertain you for the day.
I will say the American Bar Association did not have nuts on their list of...
Not a surprise.
Right, yeah. My last one I'll mention real quick actually played here at the Cedar Lee when I first started here in 2006, 2007. It was the film 12. It's a Russian film by, I'm going to do my best here, Nikita Mikhalkov. I think I got that one right. It's essentially it's 12 Angry Men, but it's not literally a Russian adaptation of it. It's just the same idea of there's 12 people on a jury deciding the fate of the accused. In this case, it's a kid who murdered, I think it's his stepdad. It's a Chechnyan kid who murders his stepdad. And there's it works in, also it's like my favorite thing because it's 2 hours and 40 minutes of a courtroom drama, and it's riveting the whole way through. Yeah. And it gives each person, with 12 different people and perspectives and arguments, you need time to let that story breathe. Yeah. And it never felt boring to me. I did only watch it once, but it really stuck with me.
No, it's a great movie.
And it was the director's second film nominated. And I think this one won. No, it was just nominated for Best Foreign Film that year at the Academy Awards. So again, I should have checked to see if that's streaming anywhere. I don't know. That may be just lost to film history or DVD or something.
Wasn't it a Sony Classics movie, I think?
Probably, if you're playing here. It's one of those. So it should be out there, but it's just the number 12 if you want to search that one out. On next week's episode, we'll be discussing Biggest Little Farm, Booksmart, Photograph, and The White Crow. So next week's Cedar Lee 3 is inspired by Olivia Wilde's directorial debut, Booksmart. Our topic is going to be School's Out. What happens when kids are out of school and on their own? Submit your picks and any suggestions you have at Cedar Lee Theater using the hashtag CedarLee3, the number 3. As always, thank you for tuning in to Cedar Lee Radio and lending us your ears this week. All the music heard on the show is original music written by Grant Heineman and performed by the New Heights Jazz Ensemble, used with their permission, of course. Visit clevelandcinemas.com for correct showtimes and to purchase advance tickets. Also, there are links in the show notes. You can use those if you'd like as well. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Cedar Lee Theater, spelled with an R-E at the end because we're fancy like that. Don't forget to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcast, and while you're subscribing, leave us a rating and review, or better yet, tell a fellow film geek about the show. We'll see you at the movies.